You're listening to Chain Leak, the crypto news podcast with your host, Joshua Roomsberg. Follow and subscribe today.
Welcome to the Chain Leak podcast. I'm your host, Joshua Roomsberg. Today's episode is sponsored by Wanchain. Today's guest, the marketing director for Wanchain, Temujin. Welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks a lot, Josh. Great to be here, and excellent pronunciation of my name. Not everyone gets it so accurate.
All right. So first, give us a breakdown of what Wanchain is and how you are looking to transform the industry.
Sure. Well, Wanchain primarily is an R&D focused blockchain interoperability project. So, right now, even still today, blockchains are all pretty isolated from one another. Things are getting better, but that's still pretty much the case. So that's really Wanchain's mission. We want to drive blockchain adoption, by building these essentially bridges, but we call them interoperability solutions that connect these isolated blockchain networks. So, quickly get into a bit of background about Wanchain. We're a pretty old project by blockchain standards. So we've been around since 2017. And actually the roots of the project stretch even far beyond that. So, over the years, not only do we have like a pretty good track record, but we've hit a lot of pretty important milestones over the years. For example, we were the first public decentralized bridge that launched. We also launched the first direct bridge connecting Bitcoin to Ethereum. So being able to bring Bitcoin directly through to Ethereum without like passing through a intermediary network. And then we've had some kind of like more recent things like NFT bridges and things like that. So that's kind of Wanchain in a nutshell,
First, let's talk about blockchain interoperability. Mm-hmm. You say that's a focal point of Wanchain. How do you emphasize interoperability between chains? And what do you feel is the focal point of that concept?
Right. So blockchain interoperability certainly is like a pretty complicated topic. There's all sorts of different layers, but what it really kind of boils down to in terms of a conceptual framework is the ability to move assets from one chain to another, the ability to send messages and receive messages to and from different blockchains. And then ultimately, it's not here yet, but we want to be able to initiate certain actions on one blockchain from another. So a simple example of that would be to just directly call, a smart contract on blockchain B directly from blockchain A. Now, so that's the kind of, sorry, go ahead.
Would the concept of that be you sign a transaction on one blockchain and that triggers a smart contract on another chain?
Exactly. So like part of the logic of the smart contract that you'd be engaging with, that you'd be triggering with a transaction on the blockchain would involve different pieces happening on different blockchains all seamlessly. Now, this is kind of the holy grail. This is not the way things work today now. We kind of fake it in some ways. And when I say we, I mean the whole industry. Like there are some things that can happen on multiple chains, but in the background, there's either like bridge nodes or something else that's, triggering the transactions on the different chains. So that's kind of the current solution, but not the long-term vision.
Would it take coding, or would that be something that the nodes would have to adapt to make happen?
What it really needs is industry standards. So, I mentioned blockchain interoperability is quite complicated. Part of the reason is because different blockchains, they have different architecture, they have different consensuses. Even the messaging itself, is quite different. If you go to Polkadot, they have XCM. And so it's kind of cool. You can, send messages pretty seamlessly within different parachains. But then if you go to Cosmos, they have a similar concept, but it's IBC. So now you have you just moved the interoperability problem. So you have IBC that's not interoperable with XDC. So what we actually kind of need is like the TCP IP for the blockchain world, something that is kind of a unified standard that all the kind of mainstream blockchains abide by. And then that will make quote unquote true interoperability possible.
Now, when you mention these letters, that's confusing to me as an end user. Is that a type of language?
Right. So these are essentially messaging protocols. So it basically just dictates what type of data, the kind of form the data has to be into so that all the different components of this network basically know what they're looking for and can recognize the things that they receive. So that's kind of what interoperability boils down to. It's just making sure that everyone can understand what everyone else is saying.
Right. Yeah. No, it sounds complicated. Now, the next thing, how many blockchains have you partnered with or have you opened bridges for to provide the concept of interoperability?
Sure. Let me start with the ones that we've connected to our cross-chain infrastructure. So today there's more than 20 different public networks that are connected to Wanchain's wide area network of blockchains. And so I think there's 15 EVMs and 6 or 7 non-EVMs. So actually the non-EVMs obviously are quite a bit more difficult to connect to a network than an EVM. EVMs are pretty automatic at this point because we were talking about standards. They all use EVMs already. So you already have these starting points that you can connect them to. But things like Bitcoin, which we connect to, Dogecoin, Litecoin, Polkadot, Tron, XRP Ledger, these are just completely different stacks. And so it makes interoperability a little more complicated, but we have kind of connected these already. So that's actually kind of one of the specialties of Wanchain is to connect these totally, we call them heterogeneous networks, but it basically just means networks that don't share any
similar, right?
Completely different architectures.
Now, for an end user to understand, what would you say a Wanchain bridge is? The simplest terms.
So a Wanchain bridge for an end user, it allows you to take your asset, your crypto, from one chain and bring it to another chain. That's really what it does. It does a lot of fancy stuff in the background, but it's really about today moving value for the user from one chain to the other. So for example, for a user, a lot of people have Bitcoin, but there's not a lot of DeFi happening on Bitcoin because there's not really smart contracts there.
Right.
So, being able to still hold your Bitcoin because you believe in the vision and then, take that Bitcoin, bring it to Ethereum or Avalanche or Phantom or whatever XDC network, and then have that Bitcoin kind of engage in the type of DeFi applications that everyone likes to use, like swaps, lending platforms. This is kind of what to an end user is enabled by interoperability and bridges.
Now, one thing I've always wondered is when you bridge an asset to an alternative chain, where does that asset come from and where does the original asset go? Is it frozen? Is it locked on the first chain? And then the same asset, like I'm trying to understand how that works.
Sure. There's a few methods, but I'll start with the simplest one and the most common one. I'll go back to my Bitcoin to Ethereum example. So, Ethereum doesn't have any quote unquote real Bitcoin on it because Bitcoin only exists on Bitcoin. So when you're using a bridge on Bitcoin, the BTC will get locked into an account that is essentially created by the bridge. And then once we've confirmed that it is locked, then it will mint what we call a wrapped token or a wrapped Bitcoin on Ethereum. And what that basically is a standard ERC20 token, but is redeemable one for one for the real Bitcoin at any given time. So that's kind of where it gains its value. And then once it's an ERC20, then it can, it behaves like any other ERC20. So you can use it in any dApps and transfer it around very quickly, very cheaply, et cetera.
So when you bring an asset onto an alternative chain, it's not like you're creating a coin or a token out of nothing. It's actually locked in on the main chain. That's correct?
Yeah, it's locked in on Bitcoin. But then in this kind of most simple example, the bridge will then trigger a smart contract on Ethereum, for example, and it'll mint ERC20 token that is a representation of a real Bitcoin that is held. And you always know the original Bitcoin is there. You can always go back in the other direction, get rid of your ERC20 on Ethereum and get your real Bitcoin back. And that's, the most simple version of this flow.
Okay. Now with that, what is the security aspect of it? So for an end user, if you were to hold ERC20 BTC, what is the security aspect of that compared to main chain? Is there anything that could go wrong by holding that wrapped asset?
Well, this is where the details are important. And it's the parts where it's, not all that feasible to totally simplify, but I'll do my best. So certainly the most secure thing is always the original asset because, that's what's, even if you have this ERC20, the value is being derived from this original asset. So,
Right.
nothing beats the real asset. So the thing is, you're lacking utility, let's say, with Bitcoin. So that's the slight trade-off. But then you have a few options. Which bridge are you going to use to take your original asset and bring it to another chain? And that's where you have to really start considering things like decentralization, security, and how each bridge operates. On one end of the spectrum, you have totally centralized entities. With them, you basically just give them your BTC, your original asset. They'll say, okay, thank you. I now am in custody of your BTC, and then I'll manually trigger a smart contract and give you an ERC20. Okay, then you have to trust me, a centralized authority. Wanchain is the opposite end of the spectrum. We do it as decentralized as possible, and we invest a ton in R&D to really kind of push the envelope on this side of things. But basically, the way it works today is with Wanchain, it all comes down to how our bridge nodes work. So the bridge itself is operated by a group of nodes, similar to how there's nodes that form a blockchain. Here, there's a bunch of nodes that form the bridge. And at any given point, there's 25 active bridge nodes in Wanchain setup. And these are the ones that are responsible for locking the asset on the original chain, minting it on the destination chain, and reversing the process. Anything cross-chain is handled by these 25 nodes. Now, these 25 nodes are totally decentralized and permissionless. You right now could go set up a bridge node if you wanted to. To kind of increase the decentralization, these 25 active bridge nodes are reelected every single month. So it's not the same people doing it all the time. And they also have to stake assets in order to become a bridge node. So we just call this over collateralization. But what it basically means is that if you want to actually be operating as a bridge node, you have to stake assets in order to do so. And the total amount of assets that the bridge node stakes kind of acts as a maximum quota that the bridge is allowed to mint. So, everyone has read the news, you've seen all these other bridges get hacked and things like that. So here with Wanchain, if there is a hack or anything like that, we could slash the bridge nodes. It's not the end users that get hurt.
So that's what I was trying to get to. So with the over collateralization, the nodes on Wanchain would basically counteract any loss to the end user. Is that what you're saying? Them by being slashed, you could take them assets that were staked and redistribute that to the end users. Is that how that would work?
It wouldn't be a direct redistribution, but yes, that is the concept. So the bridge nodes will get staked because it's their responsibility, to do the cross-chain transactions. They earn rewards, for performing their work. So that's the trade-off for them. And then if there's any either malfeasance or a hack or anything like that, then you're exactly right. It's not the end user then that loses their assets. It is the bridge nodes then who assume that risk.
Okay. Now, while we're on the subject of bridges, are there different types of bridges?
Yeah, absolutely. So the things we were talking about now where you lock and then you mint a new token, this is the most simple version. But there's a lot of different type of use cases, that, Wanchain is able to support. One important one, I guess, is, some assets, especially very popular assets, they exist on multiple chains natively. Something like USDT, it exists on Tron, it exists on Ethereum, it exists on Avalanche. And so, you don't want, the bridge has no ability to, mint these type of assets. They're minted by Tether in this case. So we have some bridges like that are, designed to allow users to move real USDT on one chain and receive real USDT on another chain. So that's one type of bridge. And then, all these different types of bridges, they have different routes. So we can bridge L1 to L1. It's like an Ethereum to an Avalanche. We can also bridge L1 to an L2. So like Ethereum to Arbitrum. But then we can also do an L2 to an L2. So that would be like directly bridging from Optimism to Arbitrum, for example. So all these different types of bridges are in place. And then, we've been talking a lot about fungible tokens, things like ERC20s, but we also bridge NFTs, as I mentioned at the start of this chat. So that's another type of bridge that is available today on Wanchain. And these are basically what we call like value transfer bridges. So a lot of these types of things. And then we briefly talked about messaging and things like that. So these also exist, but we're getting far more technical at that point.
Right. It gets crazy. Now, to keep it simple for the NFT concept of a bridge, how would that break down for an end user to understand? Is that just moving an NFT from, say, Polygon to Ethereum or Smart Chain to Polygon, something like that?
That's exactly right. So it works in a conceptually like the same way as the ones we've been talking about. So you have an NFT, let's say on Binance Smart Chain.
Yep.
When you want to bridge it to Polygon, the original NFT gets locked on the Binance Smart Chain, and then an identical copy, gets minted on Polygon and given to the user. And it maintains all the different attributes, like some NFTs, especially those that are in like, for GameFi and things like that, they have different attributes, different rarities, different skills, etc. So all these get transferred over as well.
Okay. So an NFT doesn't lose any of them attributes. They get the same attributes top to bottom. It's a exact mint on the alternative chain.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. Now, as an end user, if I was looking to use a Wanchain bridge, is it something that I could go to a website or a DApp and do it myself? Or is it something that's in the background through some of these third-party applications that I already use?
So both, the answer is all of the above, but we do have our own kind of, let's say, general front end. So that's bridge.wanchain.org. Bridge.wanchain. So that's kind of like a no frills front end, that has, all the different assets, the NFTs and things like that we support on our public bridges. And so any user can go there right now. You just connect your MetaMask or a few, there's a few wallet options, and then you can just immediately do these cross-chain transactions.
Is that something that you would do from a mobile or from a PC? Or what do you guys recommend?
I recommend desktop, but that's because I'm kind of an old man. But it does work with mobile too. You can do it, via a web browser. We also have a desktop wallet that can do a lot of these transactions, in a desktop app.
Do you guys have a Chrome extension?
So we suggest at this point using MetaMask, but it works. The bridge works with a lot of different wallet extensions, but MetaMask has kind of become a standard. So
you guys ain't working on one for yourself?
No, so
Wanchain wallet extension or something like that.
So in the old days, we had a wallet extension called the WanMask, but it was just essentially a MetaMask fork.
MetaMask, yeah, I got.
And then MetaMask changed their rules. I think maybe 2 years ago, changed their licensing. So now we just say just use the original MetaMask.
Yeah, I had an idea. Want to say it was 6 months ago. I started a new LLC and I was gonna do a wallet concept, but then I started looking into it. There's so many good wallets that support multiple chains. It's just they need to get up to speed with some of the features. Like there'll be 6 different wallets and they all have a special feature that's unique. Once the wallets adapt that technology across the board, some of these wallets that are already out are great. They just need to adapt that certain, the new features that are featured on some of these other wallets. So I had to take a step back from that wallet idea. It was going to cost probably 50, 100 grand to make it, but I didn't want to put that money over there when you got so much competition with these other wallet companies that are doing a great job already. So that was an angle I had to fall back on.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's so many people making wallets right now. If you're not doing it like full time as your primary thing, it's kind of hard to compete.
Right. Now, which projects have you guys already partnered with? I know we talked about some of the chains you guys are bridging with. Do you have any specific partnerships that you could point out?
Sure. Yeah, we collaborate, a lot with the layer ones that we do bridge to. So, for example, we have some cool stuff going on with, some big projects like Cardano and Polygon. More recently, we've also done stuff with Astar, which is one of the, I guess, most popular parachains on Polkadot, and also Telos. Since we've been around for so long, certainly over the years, we've partnered with all sorts of different projects. So these are just kind of the recent ones, those that are still very active compared to some of like the really old ones. And then I mentioned, we're really R&D focused. So we spend a lot of time working with the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. Actually, our CTO is, the head of interoperability at the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance as well. So a lot of the kind of R&D we do, to develop these standards that we talked about at the start, is done in conjunction and partnership with the Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. And then we also do stuff with some educational institutions around the world. Actually, cool. I could drop a bit of alpha here. We'll be announcing something coming out of Malaysia in the next couple of weeks. One of our VPs was spotted in Malaysia the other day. So any Wanchain viewers will probably know what I'm talking about, but we'll have some announcements regarding that coming soon.
Okay, that's cool. Now, you mentioned Cardano. Could you speak about the recent updates with the Cardano bridge?
Yeah. Cardano has been great. We've been working with them, or the company is called IOG, but they make Cardano. And it's really about making Cardano interoperable. So Cardano is actually kind of a perfect use case for someone like Wanchain or a company like Wanchain, because it's not an EVM, but it's, a huge platform with a really dedicated community. So I mentioned, where one of our specialties is connecting, completely distinct networks, not just EVM to EVM. So Cardano is kind of perfect. Them and XRPL are like great use cases. So we just announced that, our bridges are now live on Cardano pre-production. That's the final step before mainnet. And so these bridges right now, they let users move ADA, the Cardano token, to any EVM compatible chain and back. It also allows, Cardano native assets, things like JED. I don't know how plugged into Cardano you are, but JED's like a stable coin in the Cardano ecosystem. So they also to any EVM and back. And then also, other chains into Cardano. So things like BTC, things like ETH to bring it into the Cardano ecosystem. So we just announced that. It was a pretty big milestone. It took a lot of, technical efforts, changes to the actual Cardano network itself to make it possible. And so we're very happy that this is now, very close to being on mainnet. We'll be launching a public bug bounty very soon. So if anyone wants to help test it out, maybe earn some rewards by testing it, we'll be announcing the details, within a matter of days, I think.
Okay, now another thing I just thought about is if you were to bridge Avalanche or BTC onto Cardano, is that something that the bridge handles itself, like we discussed earlier? It just creates it. So the concept I'm trying to understand is you could do that with any asset theoretically.
Yes, exactly. You can do that.
You could take any ERC20 token and bridge it onto any of these other layer 2s.
Yes, assuming that they have smart contracts. That's kind of the one necessary thing if you want to bring an asset into a chain. That receiving chain, that destination chain needs to have smart contracts. Like we can't bring ETH into Bitcoin. Doesn't work. But the other way, it's fine.
I guess the thing I'm trying to wrap my head around is the project itself doesn't have to have any affiliation with any of these alternative chains.
That's correct. Now it works better that's from
mind blowing.
Yeah. I mean, it works better, of course, if the project's on board. But from a purely technical point of view, because blockchain is, an open platform or an open, not a platform, but an open technology, people can just do it.
The tough part about that is like liquidity on a third party application or chain, but being able to move an asset, say you have a specific blockchain that you wholeheartedly believe in, but some of your assets you have to hold in 6 different wallets because that asset isn't held on your main chain you like. That's what I was trying to get at. The concept of it is you would be able to move all of your assets that are not compatible onto that alternative third-party chain.
Yeah. And in a way, a lot of Wanchain's community and Wanchain's users, this is kind of what they do. So Wanchain, has an EVM layer 1 as well. And so on there's, a pretty vibrant DeFi ecosystem. You're going to find pretty much everything you expect to see, lending platforms, swaps, and things like that. And so that's kind of like a built-in use case, because all of our bridges, while we connect these other networks directly, like Bitcoin to Ethereum to Avalanche, whenever we deploy new bridges to new chains, we also link it back to the Wanchain layer 1. And so, you can go and on kind of a lending platform on Wanchain, you can lend your BTC or ETH, your AVAX, your Matic, your USDT or USDC all in one place.
So everything that's compatible with Wanchain bridges is compatible with the Wanchain blockchain?
Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
When we work with, specific projects and things like that, sometimes, they have specific requests. They might be like, "Hey, Tam, help me bring, my own token to XDC network, a very specific chain." And in those cases, if we're doing it for someone specifically, maybe we won't bridge those specific tokens to the Wanchain layer 1, but there's no technical reason why we couldn't. But all the major tokens we do.
Now, you speak about XDC. Are there any recent developments with the XDC network that you could speak on? Or is it just the bridge that's been out for, it's been out for a while now, I believe?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's a few things behind the scenes with some of the projects that are out there. I also know of a few projects that are planning to launch on the XDC network. But there's been some updates, since that original announcement. So when we started, I believe we bridged the Binance Smart Chain, Polygon, Avalanche, and Wanchain Layer 1 to the XDC network. Since that time, cool. We've also added the XRPL directly to the XDC network. There's like a lot of overlap between those two communities. Yep. And so, over the past several months, I think probably every few weeks or so, we've enabled these bridges for specific projects, XRPL projects that want to go to the XDC network. So there's been these type of, let's say, smaller developments, that have been ongoing over the past few months, certainly. And we also, sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Nope, you're good. Keep going.
I was going to say, and we also, worked with the XDC or Synfin, to kind of have that as the original launchpad for our NFT bridges when we did it. So the first kind of collections that we, tested out, or not tested, we test on testnet, but that we launched the NFT bridges with, were XDC related.
And that's what I was going to get at when I almost cut you off there was you could use that same concept for NFT bridges onto the XDC network, which is a faster chain than most blockchains. And they have a lower cost per transaction. So you could move NFTs from, say, Ethereum onto the XDC network and move that in between wallets and then bridge it back when you're ready to put that on OpenSea. Is that how that would work?
Yeah, it can be done that way for sure. A lot of these decisions are business decisions from the project. So like maybe they want to reach like a big audience in OpenSea, but they want, for all the reasons you just stated, to have the NFT begin on the XDC network. So then they can go and kind of, do little marketing campaigns or what have you in kind of the Ethereum ecosystem and bring people back into XDC. I know there's a DEX called XSwap on XDC network. So, we've done some stuff with them. We've helped bridge their token or make it cross-chain compatible, while also, I know they use a lot of the, USDT and USDC and BTC that we brought to the XDC network. So that's a place where you can trade it and do kind of farming and things like that.
Yeah, no, that was a cool thing. I realized with the XDC network is that they had USDC. That blew my mind. I didn't know how that was possible. And that's probably through a Wanchain bridge. So yeah, great job with that. The next thing I wanted to discuss with you is the X flows, Wanchain X flows. Could you give us a breakdown for an end user to understand about what X flows are and how that can be implemented?
Sure. So up till now, we spent a lot of time talking about these wrapped assets, when the bridge itself, mints a version of the asset that's backed by the real thing. But what X flows is for is when an asset already exists on multiple chains. So things like USDT, it's issued everywhere by Tether. USDC is issued everywhere by Circle. And even something like ETH, it exists natively on Ethereum, but also on the layer 2s, on Arbitrum, on Optimism, even something like Polygon. You could say that ETH there is like native. Yeah. So that's what XDC is for. It lets users hop around all these different networks where the asset is native. So moving from USDT Tron to Ethereum to Avalanche back to Ethereum, you can do that all with X flows, and it's uses the same underlying tech that Wanchain bridges use. So it's it's cheap, it's fast, decentralized, non-custodial. And, it's just a really great decentralized way to do it. There's no other way to put it. Up till now, you'd often have to use like a centralized exchange to do this very, very simply and quickly. And so this is kind of a decentralized alternative to that. And actually, just today, the timing works out. We just expanded our USDC X flows onto Arbitrum and Optimism. So this is good for people who are really active on layer twos, because obviously all layer twos like Arbitrum, Optimism, Polygon, they have their in-house bridges. That's kind of part of the job of being an L2, I guess. But it only connects, to the layer one. So in this case, Ethereum. If you are on Arbitrum and you want to go to Optimism, if you're going to use the official or the in-house solutions, then you have to go Arbitrum to Ethereum, Ethereum to Optimism. And it kind of defeats the purpose, because you expose yourself to gas fees on Ethereum multiple times to do that. So with Xflows, it's direct. So you just go Arbitrum, Optimism. It costs, what is a transaction on Arbitrum right now? Like 10 cents or something like that. And then you'll have your ETH or USDT on Optimism.
Okay. Now, another Xflow I seen was it had Bitcoin, Avalanche, Wanchain, and Smart Chain. Could you give us a breakdown of what that Xflow means?
Sure. Yeah. So that's the next kind of major upgrade to the Xflows offerings that we're going to launch. And so this is the BTC Xflows. So here, BTC on Bitcoin. Okay, it's simple enough. Everyone knows what that is. But there's a few interesting other BTCs out there. One is BTC-B on the Binance Smart Chain. That's the one, that's, Binance-backed BTC. And then there's BTC.B on Avalanche. This is the one that is, bridged to Avalanche using the in-house Avalanche bridge. So these can be treated as somewhat like native equivalent as well, because, the security of the,
is
Avalanche blockchain, it's the same. Exactly. Yeah. So it'll allow the same thing, basically a seamless flow, of this Bitcoin. So you can swap it to Avalanche, to Binance Smart Chain, to Wanchain, to Bitcoin, back and forth really, really cheaply, without having to, go back to Bitcoin, where maybe it takes an hour to confirm a transaction. And you can just go between these other chains very, very quickly and cheaply.
Okay, that sounds like a cool concept. Now, with the Bitcoin Xflows, why did you choose them 3 blockchains specifically instead of, say, Ethereum or Matic, or even XDC?
Well, the XDC one, the Bitcoin that's floating around there, is bridged by Wanchain, so it is already kind of tangentially compatible with all these things. But we don't call it as part of the Xflows product because, it's not a native Bitcoin. It's a Bitcoin that's been put there by Wanchain. So it's mostly just to be kind of accurate in our marketing and things like that. But the reason why we chose these is essentially, we do like a security evaluation basically before we support these different assets. On Ethereum, there's a variety of different bridges and entities that have so-called wrapped Bitcoin on Ethereum. We looked at some of the major ones there. None of them have really kind of, met our security needs. And so we don't want to expose, users to that. Something like Polygon, that's a fair point, since, the Polygon bridge is the in-house bridge is totally fine. So that I think is a logical, next step. If and when we do add different chains to BTC, that would be something that would be considered, certainly.
Now, is there anything else you'd like to discuss on the show today that we haven't already discussed, or any news that you would like to break here?
Sure. So, we talked a lot about XDC. So I think there's some stuff that's happening on XDC that at least, some of the Wanchain community that is tuning into this interview, might be interested to hear. So, ISO, 20022. This is kind of pretty big news these days. And this is kind of like a messaging standard for financial institutions. And a lot of the projects, and even you could say Sinfin itself, is kind of well positioned to kind of take advantage and,
take over products. That aspect of the industry for sure. Yep.
Yeah. And so, a lot of these projects in XDC are trying to become ISO 20022 compliant. And there's one there called Impel. And, they are a project that, really took advantage of the Wanchain bridges when we initially deployed them to the XDC network. So what that project does, they want to basically, offer any organization that needs to send these like compliant financial messages in the right format can use their product. And then optionally add, the Wanchain wrapped BTC or USDC or USDT as kind of instant settlement as part of these transactions. So I don't know if you wanted to get into that. We could talk about international remittance in more detail. My previous life did involve that, so I know a little bit about it. But but I think it's just something cool that maybe your viewers can go poke around a little bit more in XDC and learn all about that. And besides that,
that was a big thing that coming into this interview, that was something I was always wondering was the ISO messaging standards. Are there any Wanchain bridges that are involved with that compliance there? Because being able to bridge these assets in between chains and keep that same messaging standard, that's going to be groundbreaking for the next generation of financial inclusion.
Yeah, I think here it's going to be important for a lot of the users who maybe don't have background to really understand, okay, what is ISO 2022 or 2022 and what's it kind of for? And like, I think I mentioned, I used to work, in international remittance. And so basically, I think if, in explain like I'm five approach to it, international remittance is broken up into like five layers, basically. There's capture, there's messaging, there's settlement, there's liquidity, and there's disbursement. And so capture disbursement, that's pretty simple. That's when you hand your money to a third party agent or a bank or a middleman or something. And disbursement is when, the receiver gets money back. And then there's all this stuff that happens in between. Messaging, this is kind of where ISO 2022 or 2022. It's hard to say, but that's where it fits in, because right now the way kind of international remittance works is that it's so fractured, and people would be like stunned to learn like different countries, different banks, different third parties. They can't even agree on like how to structure their data, what data they need to be capturing. And, it's kind of like the same problem we have with blockchain interoperability right now, is that we just need standards to make everything simpler. So this is kind of where ISO or the new ISO will come into play. It's kind of over the next few years, a bunch of, major institutions are committed to adopting this standard. And so this will, in theory, make this type of remittance more interoperable between different countries, a little less fractured. It won't solve everything, but it'll do a lot. But when you're talking about bridges and the assets that are coming in, this is only tangentially related to the messaging layer itself. It's really more part of the settlement layer that is one of the five layers I mentioned. So that's why, something like Impel, it's an optional feature to the message. So the asset that Wanchain bridges, they themselves, it doesn't really mean much to say like that asset is in and of itself ISO 20022 compliant. It's really more about how the message is being transferred across chains. So perhaps down the road, as like enterprises and the mainstream and banks are totally on blockchain, they'll be issuing basically, here is the messaging format that everyone must use, and at that point, all the bridges, all the blockchains will probably get in line.
I think I was thinking overall the concept of, say you receive USDC as a business and you needed to bridge that to a different blockchain to store on your to store the asset as a business versus receiving that payment on an alternative chain, using a bridge to convert that. But you're saying that would be on the end user. It wouldn't have nothing to do with the messaging standard.
The moving of the assets itself will probably not have anything to do with the ISO 20022. At least as things are currently positioned.
Because I was thinking, say a business in Dubai wanted to send USDC, but they wanted to send it on Ethereum. And as a business, you wanted to receive it on XDC. There's no bridge involved there that could make that happen, that would incorporate the messaging standard.
Like you would have to do that vis-a-vis, like with something like Impel. So the part of that would make it compliant, let's say, it has to be abiding by ISO 20022 for that to be compliant. It's a little tricky, but it's not actually the part that's bringing the asset from one chain to another. But the kind of the product layer, like Impel, is the one that is making sure that it's all compliant by communicating that, by making those messages compliant with ISO 20022. It's not actually about how the asset gets locked and minted.
Yeah, no, that's the craziest part, bro. It gets so deep trying to understand all this new technology and how the transformation is going to be over the next even 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
It's going to be way different than it even is today. And that's crazy to me.
Yeah. And, everything is changing all the time. It's like really impossible to stay on top of everything. And, it always comes to standards in a way, it's like even the behavioral standards in blockchain are not established yet. So things get really messy because everyone's, doing crazy stuff and doing it in their own way.
Right. All right. Well, thank you for being here today. I appreciate you being on the show. This is the marketing director for Wanchain. Temujin?
That's right.
All right. Got you, brother. Thank you for being here, brother. I appreciate you being here.
All right. Thanks a lot for having me. Talk soon.
All right. Have a good day.
All right. You too. Bye.